Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek. This is the start of a brand new series that I am going to be entitling My Favorite Theory. And what it is I'm inviting on some of my favorite creators, some new voices, different voices for this channel, who are going to come here with a theory about A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. And then we're just going to discuss it and try and get into it in some detail. Now, I've started off with somebody who I think most of you will probably already know, one of my favorite creators, one of what I think is the most intelligent and erudite members of this community. I shall let her introduce herself, though. Gray, do you want to say hi?
Oh my gosh, thank you. That was sweet. 7 blessings, everyone. It's a great area, and thank you, Robert, for having me on your channel. I'm ready to convince you.
Fantastic. Now, this is a great topic. You've probably seen from the title already, but this is something that I'm going to be really interested to hear the kind of logic behind. And I know we've been talking just before we went on air, and I know that this is something that Gray has been thinking about and is really keen to discuss. So, the topic is Euron the Valonqar? We're just going to start off. We'll let my guest here explain the thinking, explain the theory, and then we'll get into it. So go ahead. What is the theory?
Okay, so the theory is that Euron is the Valonqar. Euron is the one to kill Cersei. So when Cersei was little, she had a prophecy from Maggie the Frog, and the prophecy was that the Valonqar would basically kill her. So there's a lot of people that think, oh, well, it's this person, it's this person, it's this person. Well, I think it's Euron. And it's like my champion theory is what I started my channel kind of on. But so she goes to see Maggie the Frog and she gives her this prophecy. Now, we know that the prophecy has came true, like the amount of kids she had, she would marry the king, she wouldn't marry Rhaegar. All those things happened. It says, and when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. So Valonqar means little brother. And the wording is the little brother, not your little brother. And it says, shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat. Jamie, who is a candidate, he does not have hands, plural. He only has one hand. So then, if you look at the wording, and when your tears have drowned you, drowned being in that relates to Euron because he's a Greyjoy. Greyjoys worship the drowned god. They're drowned men. And not only that, but their sigil is a kraken. And if a kraken was to kill you, they could basically pull you under the water and drown you. Let's see. They could also wrap their tentacles around you and suffocate you. Or they could eat you. But sorry, I'm getting off track. So then like when I first put the theory together, there were some other things, like when she's having a dream, like people that these are things that I didn't come up with on my own. These are things that like people told me about either in the comments or like Dan made a video adding this piece onto it, and it was that Cersei dreams of the Valonqar choking her, and Cersei of course thinks it's Tyrion, but in the dream she talks about him having mismatched eyes. She sees the Valonqar and he has mismatched eyes. Well, the only other character that has mismatched eyes right now is Euron. There's Tyrion, but then Euron. So I think that could be a nod at Euron. I also think that when she's having the dream of her going to see Maggie the Frog, she wants to warn herself to run away. When she has that dream, she tries to warn herself not to see Maggie the Frog, but to run away. She tries to warn herself in the dream, and she can't speak because she doesn't have a tongue. Well, Euron, that's what his favorite thing is to do, is to cut people's tongues out. And So there's also the ties to the actual wording. The Valonqar. The Valonqar is the only part of the prophecy that's in High Valyrian. So why use that word? Maybe Maggie just wanted to troll Cersei, so she didn't know what the Valonqar meant. But maybe it should be someone that has some kind of relation to Valyria. We know Jon and Dany have blood ties, but I doubt it's them. So I think that besides people that actually have blood of Valyria, Euron is the only one in the story right now that's walked the ruins. He has a dragon horn from Valyria, a suit of Valyrian armor. He's related to Valyria, basically. So that's the small version, the easy swallow version of why I think it's Euron.
Excellent. Well, I have to say, first of all, I really like that. I think that's a really good, concise summary of some fantastic points. So let's break it down a little bit, because a lot of this centers around the word, as you say, the word Valonqar, which incidentally we should point out wasn't on the show. So this is a book theory, and in a bit I think perhaps we'll get onto whether or not it's going to be the same in the books on the show. But when we're talking about Valonqar being little brother or the little brother, Euron, of course, yes, he does have an older brother, but he's just like brother number 2 out of 5. Do you think that makes much of a difference?
Not really. Because if we like compare that to Jaime and Cersei, Jaime still has a little brother too. You know what I mean? Like Cersei and Jaime together have a little brother. So I kind of don't think that makes a difference.
Okay. I mean, I find it's one of those things where you could say, okay, yes, you could interpret this as being he is a little brother, therefore he fits. Or you could say, well, how strict are we going to be about this? Are we going to say little brother has to be somebody that you would describe as little brother? And for me, I think both Jaime and Tyrion clearly fit in Cersei's mind of who she would think of as being little brother. Either of those two might fit. So I think I start off with the query about whether or not he counts as being a little brother, but there's a lot of doubt about that word, because this is in High Valyrian, and all the way through we see again and again there are problems with translation of High Valyrian, aren't there? Issues about gender and what it actually might mean. And I particularly liked this link you drew out there, whether using a High Valyrian word is implying that the Valonqar themselves have got some link to High Valyria. Is there anything else you want to sort of draw? You said that you gave us the short version, the bite-sized version. Is there anything else in that kind of link that you could kind of draw out just to explain why Euron has got a stronger link to Valyria than perhaps any other character?
But just because he's been there, he's the only one that's been there and lived to tell about it. I also think that whatever he found there has kind of like corrupted him worse than what he was, worse than what we know about him. Like all those goods that he found are like poisoned in a way, just like the doom is on them. And I just feel like that word can't be there just for like flight of fancy. So if it's using Valyrian, then I think maybe we should look at Jon and Dany as potentials, but I don't see them going like on a path like that to strangle the life from Cersei. I don't see like, could you see Daenerys like jumping on Cersei and strangling her?
No, I mean, except that, I mean, I think that is the method of killing is quite an interesting one. So it is very much the kind of thing that you could only see certain characters doing. So although I don't think it is referring to Tyrion, Cersei obviously does think it's referring to Tyrion, but it's the kind of way that you could imagine that he could kill someone. He strangles Shay, obviously, so that's a thing that he has done in the past. And can we come on to Jaime, though, because you specifically ruled him out of the idea of being the Valonqar because of his hand. Now, we could get into sort of like semantics, I suspect, about whether or not you could wrap a golden hand around somebody, but do you think that in and of itself, the fact that he has got one golden hand, means that he cannot be the Valonqar? Is it as clear cut to you as that?
No. I don't think that's like the sole thing that automatically I don't think that's the sole thing that automatically says Jaime is void. Jaime is invalid to be the Valonqar, because I think there's a lot of evidence for Jaime too. I just don't think, I think he's on this big redemption thing. And I think killing his sister would ruin that, because like, okay, he's the Kingslayer. He's pushed a little boy from a window. He's getting away from all that. And then to become a kinslayer, even though his sister is terrible, like that's his sister. That's the mother of his children. I think it would be bad for his growth. It would be like full circle. Like he killed the Mad King and now he's kind of repeat history and kill his sister the same way.
Yeah.
Because she's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's actually one of the most attractive things about the idea of Jaime being the Valonqar is the idea that this does bring him full circle. So he's obviously got this Kingslayer epithet to him, but also I wonder whether that might, at the end of his life, be Queenslayer as well. That kind of balances well for me. And we get a lot in the books. It doesn't come out so much in the show, but in the books there's a lot of references to that. They both say, you know, we came into the world together, we will leave this world together, which to me kind of implies that they die at the same time. And the kind of the balance for me with the Kingslayer Queenslayer thing is the fact that when he killed the Mad King, he was doing what was actually quite a noble deed. He was saving tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, but no one gave him the credit for it. They just remembered him for breaking his vows. I wonder whether, given the fact that we've already seen Cersei's willingness to be blowing up bits of King's Landing with wildfire, whether Jaime might find himself in the same position, but this time he does get the credit for it. He does get the glory for it. Everybody recognizes that, yes, he did. He killed his sister, but he did it in order to save lives, and that is what suddenly redeems him, not just in and of himself, but in the eyes of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, that is attractive if you look at it like that. But I do think that that if we came in the world together, we're gonna die together. I do think that holds weight, but I don't necessarily think that he's the one that's gonna kill her. I think he may die right along with her. He may be killed with her, or he may be killed trying to stop her from getting killed. But I feel like Jaime is one of those things that she loves. She manipulates him and she uses him and she does all of these things to him. But I think that he's going to die before her, because it's like, what does it say when the new queen that's going to come and strike down everything you hold dear? And then when your tears have drowned you. Yes, she holds her children dear, but she holds Jaime dear too. Jaime's like all she has. So I would think that she would lose him. Maybe she doesn't have to lose him in death. Maybe she just loses him, as we see on the show. He goes to Winterfell, or he's on his way to Winterfell. I don't know. I think it like, I want to just see Jaime like never look back at Cersei again. Like I want to see him just go into battle, blaze of glory. Like, I don't want him to ever look back for Cersei.
I get that, and I think that certainly, and we'll get on, I'm sure, in a moment, but the difference between the show and the books here, I think in the show, he has had that confrontation with Cersei. He's had that moment when he's turned his back on her, and she's been like saying you wouldn't dare, and he goes anyway. And so I think he's had that. So I feel that strongly in the show, that he's had that moment and he now needs to move on. I think the books, he hasn't had that moment. And I don't think he necessarily will have that moment there in the books. I think that perhaps his arc does have to end with him back with Cersei at the end of things. But I want to bring on to one of the other candidates that we've got for Valonqar, which I'm sure you, as I have seen lots of theories about this, and she's one of the characters who clearly wants to kill Cersei, which is Arya. Now, do you think we're taking the High Valyrian as being gender neutral? Do you think that she is a possible Valonqar as well, as the fact, given that she very much will want to come down and kill Cersei?
I don't think it's possible for it to be Arya, because it does say the Valonqar, and that part is general neutral. But it says right after that, shall wrap his hands. So that his makes me think that it's a male. But like if that could be, I guess that could be like semantics. So if I would not get any joy from Arya killing Cersei, I don't think I'll get any joy from Euron killing Cersei. Well, I will now because I'm because I made the theory. but the person I would want to see do it the most is Sansa, but I don't see that happening. So like if Arya was to do it with Sansa's face and it would be like really crazy, then okay, I'm for it. But I just don't think it's a girl.
No, I mean, I could see potentially that it could be Arya with Jaime's face on or something like that. I could certainly see how that might happen, because realistically, we have to start thinking about how might this happen, what within the plot might allow this to happen. And for Cersei to have somebody strangle her, that's not just like she got caught in the crossfire of a battle. This is somebody has got right close to her and is physically assaulting her. And I think that happens in one of two ways. Either she gets so isolated that she really is the only person left, everybody's killed, the Mountain, Qyburn, whoever is guarding her, or she allows that person in because she trusts them in some way. If it's that latter option, then I think it's quite limited who she would allow in. I think Jaime, conceivably, she could. I think Euron, conceivably, she could. But beyond that, no. I don't think she would allow others into that close proximity to her like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I told you the other day, if it's not Euron, I think that it has to be Jaime. But I don't like it that it would be Jaime. I want him to like what I really want for Jaime is for him to get with Brienne and live happily ever after, but like that's Disney.
That's not gonna happen.
That's Disney, and this is Game of Thrones. So it's like what is gonna happen? I don't know what Cersei could do to make him kill her.
With Jaime, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
I think it is the echo of what has happened before with the Mad King is the thing that I could see. I can't see Jaime just going down there and killing her just because he could. I could see him going down there and killing her because there is what he considers to be a greater good that has to be done. He's shown that that's in his heart, and I think that he would conceivably do it again. I also think that we can all see a situation in which Cersei blows up or plans to blow up all of King's Landing. If everything's gone wrong for her, if she's feeling isolated there, that is very much within her arsenal, one of the things that she might do. And if she is in that position, someone will have to stop her. And for me, the most poetic person to stop her in that situation would be Jaime. But
yeah.
can I come on to what I thought were some of the most convincing things you said, which were the language uses around that passage. There's the bit when she's having the dream, remembering it, and she tries to call out to tell her younger self, don't go to Maggie the Frog, don't listen to this prophecy, and she can't because her tongue isn't there. And also in a sort of another passage just before she's thinking about this, she talks about how much she'd love to cut out Marjorie Tyrell's tongue. And so there's very much that kind of link across there to Euron. And as you pointed out as well, with the idea of her tears drowning her, drowning is very much an Iron Men kind of imagery. So I think that this is the kind of thing for me that George R. R. Martin loves to do, is use words and language that give hints of things in the future. And I think this is probably the most convincing part of this theory, is the fact that a lot of the language around that is pointing towards Euron rather than anyone else.
Yes. And the show did something last season. You'll probably remember it as soon as I say it. But when Euron meets Cersei, he says, "Here I am," and he holds out his hands and he says, "With two good hands." And I'm just like, okay, they're doing it. They're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. And that my initial thoughts was, I'm sure, exactly the same as yours. So he's trying to show I can be the Valonqar, to nod to those of us who overanalyze these things. But I was reading an article, actually, this was quite a while ago, but I was reading an article apparently that Dan and Dave wanted to take that line back out. And Pilo Asbeck actually said, you know what, I'd quite like it to be back in, because I think it adds a little element of comedy. I think wasn't quite the word he was using, but showing a sort of a dark humor of Euron. So he's not just this kind of like guy who was otherwise just sort of going in and showing off about how great the Iron Fleet was, but he was actually having a little dig at Jaime while he was at it. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, the show is not caring too much about the Valonqar. They didn't include that line in the flash.
Yeah.
And then this very nearly that line wasn't in the show. So I get it, and I like it as a sort of a nod to book people, but I don't think that was what was going on there.
I disagree. No, because like, I don't know. I'm not gonna say like I just disagree, but I don't know. Like I'm gonna wait and see what happens. Because like there's even like I think it was in one of the scenes when Cersei's standing on the map. I don't know, the internet went crazy because Cersei was standing on the neck and Jaime was standing on the fingers. And they're like, "Oh, Valonqar, Easter egg." And I'm like, "Oh my God." But I do the same thing.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was one of those people. It was I think I retweeted it. It was a fantastic picture, and it was the kind of thing that what the show does, I think, quite well. I know some people don't like it, is when they are missing out a huge bit of plot. Like, for example, all of the things with House Dane and the Sword of the Morning and Dawn and things like that. They just gave us a couple of seconds of sort of longingly looking at the sword and then moved on. And similarly with the Horn of Winter, they showed that the horn was there in that cache of dragon glass that they found north of the wall. They allowed us to see it and then they moved on. And I quite like that as a kind of a nod to, yes, there is stuff here in the books about this, but we're going to move on. And I think it probably was over analysis and reflection, but I liked the thought that this was a nod to the Valonqar theory, that the fingers and the neck, it worked for me.
Yeah, it was cool.
Okay, so let's move on to the logistics of this, because what we said a moment ago is that for this to happen, this has to make sense.
Yes.
Now, I don't know whether it's going to be the same on the show as it will be in the books, but let's work on the assumption, and feel free to contradict me if you like, but let's work on the assumption that Cersei does die on the show. Now, someone has to kill her, and that someone, presumably, we will be able to look at and go, oh yeah, okay, it makes sense that they were the Valonqar. How do you think, therefore, this fits? Why would Euron kill Cersei?
Okay, so in the Forsaken chapter, when the Dampere has his like crazy zooted dreams or whatever they were, visions, he sees Euron on the Iron Throne. So I definitely believe that Cersei has burned a lot of bridges and Euron is gonna link up with Cersei. And I think actually it may be like kind of via Aegon or Phaegon kind of thing. But so this wedding thing, this marriage proposal where Euron wants to marry Cersei. Once he marries, first of all, she's leading him on. She has no intention of marrying Euron. Like, I don't believe she does. I think in the books, she says, when they're like having a small council meeting, she says, like, I don't intend to crawl in bed with that sorry pack of squid. Like, she has zero respect for the Ironborn or Ironborn ways or anything like that. So, I don't think that she's gonna want to marry Euron. And then in the kind of society that it is, if she was to marry Euron, she loses all of her power. Right now, she's queen. But if she marries him, then he becomes her king, which would mean usually the king has more power than the queen, and the people are going to listen to the king over Cersei, unless Cersei just has all like puts her people everywhere. But either way, I don't think she's going to marry him. And then like when she finally like refuses to marry him, I think he's going to kill her and just take the throne for herself. That's what they did to Ned. That's what Cersei did to Ned, basically. Killed Ned and put her son on the throne. So Euron can just kill her because in the vision, he's on the Iron Throne.
Absolutely. So I think I agree to an extent. I think that definitely the kind of the teaming up that happens between Cersei and Euron on the show will happen in the books. I think obviously there's a whole load of extra layers going on in the books, but the way I can see the books going is that he's got his grand plans to effectively kidnap the dragons and Daenerys, and that's all going to go wrong. That he will then give up on that idea and he will instead see his best hope as being teaming up with Cersei. And I think that is probably the way it's going to go. And he sees, let's not forget, that sitting on the Iron Throne is not the end game for Euron. He wants to be a god. That's what he's aiming for. But sitting on the Iron Throne is the start of it for him. So I can certainly see him trying to get into Cersei's good graces in a way. And I can see a team up happening there. And I can certainly see the fact that he will view her as being a means to an end in the same way that she views him as being a means to an end. They both think that they're in control of what's going on. They both think that they're using the other person. But ultimately, if you had to back one of the two of them to come out on top, you'd probably go with Euron, because Euron slightly crazier and also slightly more devious and clever with the way that he does things, whereas Cersei is quite a blunt instrument in my reading of the characters. So I could certainly see that he would want to get rid of her, having teamed up with her.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, if Cersei and Euron are going into a match of wits, wits and battle plans or whatever, I would definitely put my money on Euron.
Agreed. So let's try and bring all of this together now. So the theory is that the Valonqar, the person who is prophesied to kill Cersei, is Euron. Now, we should probably point out at this moment, I can't remember whether we did it earlier, that Maggie the Frog's prophecies thus far have proved pretty accurate. So that's why we're taking this one seriously, because this is really one of only a couple of things that Maggie the Frog said that haven't yet come true. So we're saying that perhaps this is going to be Euron because of the links across to Valyria, and the word Valonqar is in Old Valyrian, because of the fact that it makes some kind of plot sense for them to get together in the books as they have on the show. Now, my two things that I find a little nagging in my mind when I'm thinking about this, the first one, as I said already, is that whether or not little brother counts for Euron. I'm not sure that for me, that hangs entirely right. I look at him, I don't think little brother, because he was the older brother to more people than he was the little brother to. And just in terms of plot, I think it works better in the books, not the show, for this to be Jaime. Now, I think where I'm heading with this is you said sort of halfway through this that you think it's Euron, but if it isn't Euron, then it's going to be Jamie. I think I would probably put it the other way around. For
Yeah,
me, I think it's probably Jamie, but if it isn't him, it's probably Euron. But I want to put to you the question, do you think it's going to be the same person who kills Cersei in the books and in the show?
I do. I do. And another reason that I think it's Euron is because they had basically written the Greyjoy story away. They just kind of like, okay, Theon and Yara, that's all you get. Bye-bye. Like that's kind of what they did. And then they waited until season 6 when we were so far past where the story itself was so far past where they were in the story. We're talking 2 seasons behind, 2 or 3 seasons behind. So 2 or 3 seasons ago, they should have introduced the Ironborn, but they didn't, and they like just carried on the show like nothing was happening on the Iron Islands, like they didn't even exist. And then they circle back and they're like, "Oh, we forgot to do this. Let's do this." Like they realized that it was important, or maybe George told them like the Ironborn are going to have a big part to play. You need to like work this in here. I just it seems like that he's really important and his role is going to be huge. And I don't know a role for Euron other than killing Cersei and causing a whole bunch of mayhem. I don't think Jamie's ever going to see Cersei again.
No, I think on the show, I think you're right. And this is why I tend to the view that there's going to be a different outcome on the show in terms of the Valonqar, different outcome on the show to that in the books, partly because they did not include this idea of the Valonqar in the show, which strikes me as that they're trying not to, or they were perhaps wanting to give themselves wiggle room for it not being who it was going to be in the books. Because in the books, I think that it will be somebody that we'll be able to look at and go, the Valonqar, that makes sense. On the show, they didn't have that in, and it kind of makes me wonder whether or not this is to allow them a little bit of extra wiggle room to have somebody else killing Cersei in the end, because they've collapsed a lot of plots in. Now, I think the danger of the Ironborn in terms of how they've been used is that they are just there as a kind of a Cersei support act. So they've effectively, the way I view it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one, but the way I view it is that Euron over the last season was basically just doing the things that Cersei needed him to do. He was having the sea battles to destroy the Dornish fleet effectively, and then he's now heading off to go and get the Golden Company, who will then magically appear and be her army. And yes, he's there and he will have a plot, but it's basically just as this kind of support act. Do you think that's the way that they're being used in the show, or do you think that there is another layer that they're going to bring in?
Yeah, I think they're kind of. I don't think he's gonna have much to do. Like you said, he's like Cersei's dog. Like he just goes and follows all of her commands. Because they didn't introduce any of the magical stuff about Euron. Like Euron has potential to be like one of the coolest characters on Game of Thrones. Like he's a full-on basically wizard, and they just didn't include any of that. So I do kind of feel like the Greyjoy, well, at least the Euron storyline is basically support for Cersei. But I think it has basically room to kind of grow in season 8 because the Golden Company is coming in. So are we going to see more of Euron interacting with the Golden Company? Are we going to see Theon and Euron face off? Like these are all things that could happen and could potentially be, those like a jaw dropping moments. But I agree. It's mainly Cersei support.
Agreed. Okay, so let's see whether we can come, just to sort of round this off, let's see whether we can come to some kind of agreed position or something on this. So what I think we've agreed is that there are two main candidates to be the Valonqar. Now, I think I clearly place more weight on what I consider to be Jaime's story arc, which ends in the books, at least, with him confronting Cersei and having a moment of redemption compared to what happened with the Mad King. And I think you're placing more emphasis on the kind of literary clues that George R.R. Martin gave in terms of like the tongues and the drowning and things like that. So there are two different bits of evidence here that we can kind of weigh up. So can we kind of reach an agreement that it's one of these two characters?
Yes.
Fantastic. I love it. Agreement. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap that one up there. Gray, thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute delight. Do you want to just let people know where they can find you if people are looking for you on the internet?
Oh, thank you for having me on. Thanks to everyone for listening. I hope I convinced some of you, but you can find me on Gray Area on YouTube and This Gray Area on Twitter and Instagram.
Excellent. And guys, as you know, I only invite people on my channel that I would personally recommend. I would highly recommend you go and check out This Gray Area. She's been around this community for a couple of years now and produces some excellent videos, so I would highly recommend you go and check that out. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think that Euron might be the Valonqar? Do you think it might be Jaime? Or do you think we have missed something really obvious and it's somebody else completely? Let me know in the comments below. It'll be fantastic to hear from you. So thank you very much. Thank you to my guest today. Take care, guys, and I shall see you again soon.